Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with Michigan-based homeless junkie to eight-figure CEO William Mckenzie. These days, he is the CEO of Left Coast Holdings, which is a vertically integrated cannabis company. He was a former legacy grower from the hills of Northern California. 11 years ago, he was a homeless junkie, and in the current day, his business does $20 million a year. He's got a brutal yet inspiring story of survival and success. It's a great one. Enjoy this interview.
Joe, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you today?
I'm doing well.
Good. Hey, it's great to meet you. Thanks for taking a minute after the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
So before we get into your life, from kind of a rags to riches story here, I want to know, the last 3 years, COVID worked on all of us in its own way, and I'm curious how you survived that 3-year pandemic period and how it's changed the way that not only you live your life, but the way that you conduct business now.
Sure. So we were in a little bit of a unique position as we were really building our business when the shutdown first started. I was at the time traveling back and forth from California to Michigan, getting cannabis licenses. And when the world shut down, I could no longer do that. So my wife and I actually packed up our trailer and drove to Michigan, and we stayed here for 6 weeks and ultimately decided that we liked it and that it was probably going to be crucial for us to live here full time since travel was going to be an issue. So that caused us to move from California to Michigan in 2020. So that was a big life change for us, obviously spurred on by COVID. We had issues. We were building a farm and a retail store at the time, and we couldn't get things like cement. And so even though we were outside and we had this status as a necessary business, medical marijuana, there were a lot of things that we couldn't get that kept us from moving forward. But there were a lot of things that we could do, like we could stay open because we were a necessary business. And so that for sure was an advantage in our industry. And cannabis sales went up 50% during COVID. Obviously, when times are tough, people tend to lean on, crutches, if you will, or, if you're staying home and you're not going to work, people are probably drinking and using cannabis more than they might if they were going to the office every day. So COVID definitely had a significant impact on both myself and my business, both positive and negative. And then from a personal perspective, right in the beginning of the pandemic, I had a close friend, her husband died unexpectedly, just dropped dead in his driveway. And so my mental health was significantly affected by COVID. I was, in a pretty bad place from an anxiety standpoint. And so there was, difficult for me to kind of push through a lot of the stuff that I was dealing with personally and at work. But we managed to get through it, do therapy, I do a lot of personal development stuff that helped me along the way.
Well, I guess if that's the thing, the few things that I've seen that's kind of come out of COVID is that, I live in Missouri and Kansas City, and we just passed the referendum to have, recreational marijuana sales. And, mental health, it's finally something that's not taboo. It's not something that people look at, in ways that they used to. I think it's taken more seriously now. That, I'm curious right now, living in a state that's finally legalized it, since it's not legal on a federal level and, the state level still have to deal with their individual ways, I've always wondered with those out there that are dealing with this as business owners, how difficult is it to run that kind of business now in 2023?
It's a very difficult business. So I've been in it for a long time. I come from the legacy market in California. I am one of the guys that you hear about, like up in the hills in Northern California, growing pot in the forest. And so entering the regulated market, that in and of itself has been, challenging. But, Michigan has been a little bit unique in that it's been significantly affected by the black market, the legacy market, whatever you want to call it. And for the last 18 months, the cannabis market in Michigan has really been in a free fall. Wholesale prices dropping as much as 90%, and retail prices dropping 60 to 70%. So Michigan has the cheapest retail cannabis prices in the United States, and people from, all the surrounding states, Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, Minnesota, all come to Michigan to shop for cannabis because it's really cheap. From an operator standpoint, from people who are trying to, abide by the law and, follow and be compliant, it made it difficult to survive. A lot of people went out of business over the last, 18 months. And the market has just now started to turn around in the first quarter of 2023 due to a regime change at the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, and the new head of the agency coming from an enforcement background, being an executive from the Michigan State Police. And we have seen wholesale prices increase 500% after he started suspending people's licenses for doing illegal stuff. And, you might think like, oh, poor cannabis operators, like you guys come from the black market, now you want to complain about the black market affecting the regulated market. Well, it's a deeper issue than that. It's about, trying to bring the entire industry into the light and trying to operate in a regulated and compliant fashion and put out products that are safe for people to consume. And what we've had in Michigan for the last 18 months is stores full of unregulated product that came from unregulated grows, unregulated labs, things that weren't tested, and that was a big health and safety issue. And so I'm really glad that the state finally did something about it.
What always blows me away, especially now that, states are getting to be more compliant, legalizing marijuana. The thing that gets me, and I'm asking you this from your understanding of it, we have like the top three mind alters in this country. You have cigarettes, you have alcohol, and you have marijuana. And the most destructive out of those is obviously cigarettes, probably, and then alcohol, if not they're head-to-head. Why is it that there's been such a stigmata and such an illegal nature around marijuana that probably causes the least problems for people? I've heard historically it was DuPont that did this, and there's been all kinds of things that have gone into this. From your understanding, why has this been such an illegal, sticky issue for America?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of the, like the origin stories behind reefer madness, I think is what they were calling it. And I heard a lot of it had to do with, what was it, DuPont or Hearst, who owned paper mills, and they were concerned that hemp was going to overtake paper as an industrial product, and so they put out this massive propaganda campaign, and that kind of started things. And then obviously we've been losing the war on drugs for how many years now. To me, I think that cannabis is the least harmful of all the mind-altering substances in terms of health, the effects on health as well as the effects on society. I mean, it's interesting, right? We put on a sales and consumption event, right? We do a music festival where The city and the state have licensed us to sell cannabis products, and for the people who come to this festival to consume them in a regulated area. And then we have bands that play, and it's a fun event on the beach here in Manistee. And sorry, someone just walked in and I lost my spot.
No, you're fine.
We're in this small town in northern Michigan with a significant older population, and they've been doing these events with beer tents for ages, right? And when we proposed to do this marijuana event, we got a big backlash from people. People get shot doing marijuana, and what's going to happen when they overdose on the gummies? I heard people overdose on the gummies and the edibles, and just such a negative idea around this stuff for so long now. It's just ingrained in people. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed is changing people's minds about this, right? Like when we came here and opened in this town, I had a very clear idea that we were going to have to change hearts and minds. So we got really involved in the community, and it's allowed us to do stuff like put this event on. And we have gotten people who have been entrenched in their ideals for, 50, 60, 70 years to come around and say, hey, this stuff isn't that bad. These guys aren't that bad. They're really supportive of the community. They're really respectful. They do a good job. And so when we went back we just got it approved again for a second year. And last year it was highly contested, 4-3 vote. This year we got it approved 7-0.
So I'm curious, you have a very interesting story about how you've arrived at this point, kind of going from, homelessness and having a drug problem to being a very successful businessman, and obviously a very, not only is it medicinal, but it's also a really, I think it's going to help a lot of people out in a lot of different capacities. How did this story unfold for you? It's kind of a rags to riches kind of a thing. How did it happen?
So I come from a background that has alcoholism and addiction in it. It's, pretty deeply entrenched in my family on both sides. I was, a heavy drinker in my early days, and my background goes by the old adage, like, hey, if you get up and go to work in the morning, then you don't have a problem. And so for me, drinking heavily was just kind of normal, and I was able to find success in my teens, in my early 20s. I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. It's a good school. I started a business out of college. It was successful. But when I ran into opiates, it was like running through a buzzsaw. It really spiraled my life out of control quickly. And within a few years, I was homeless and had lost everything. I lost a multi-million-dollar business that I had started. I was kicked out by my partner, and that was really kind of the biggest and best. It sounds weird saying it, but it's absolutely the best thing that ever happened to me, right? Because I think about if I had just gone on drinking, I would have wound up being an alcoholic in my 40s, and probably getting a divorce and having some DUIs. And I instead, ran through all of that in a span of a couple of years in my 20s and got sober at 28 and had an opportunity to really learn about myself. I think that recovery is a great process for people to go through just from a self-learning and self-love standpoint. I spent 6 months in a facility with no contact with the outside world, no mask on, no external valuables, nothing that I identified with in the outside world, this like show that I put on forever, that I was successful, that I was doing okay. I was stripped of all that, and it was just me working on myself. And when I came out from that experience, I had a very clear vision of who I was and what I wanted to do. and it was going to be a really long road for me to get there, and I had to take it in bite-sized pieces. But it has definitely made me into the person that I am today and the business person that I am today. I think that a lot of people would benefit from going through a similar process, although I don't recommend that people get addicted to drugs, but just the idea that, we're so connected and so tied into our image these days. If people ever have the opportunity to step away from that for a period of time and go inside themselves and really get to know and love themselves again, that, it could really make a difference, I think, in the world.
So in your life, in our collective lives, the people that inspire and motivate us, really get us through things, who's been kind of a hero for you in your life?
My uncle, I guess, there are different heroes, right? I had an uncle who passed away in early recovery, which was a difficult thing for me to go through. But he was a very successful, he was at the Chicago Board of Trade. He was one of the directors of the Chicago Board of Trade. And he was really someone that I looked up to throughout my life. Like, I want to be like him. I want to be a businessman like him. In college studied agricultural business, talking to him about commodities trading. And that was, that was somebody who I was really trying to emulate. Now, obviously my career took a different path. But I think that happens to most people, right? You idolize somebody when you're younger. You might try to do what they do. And then ultimately you find your own path. But, he was just a great family man, very successful, a good provider. And that was something that I wanted to be. When at his funeral, there was a line around the block, I don't know, a couple thousand people there. And that really had a remarkable effect on me. Like, wow, this man really touched a lot of people, because I've been to plenty of funerals and I've never seen anything like that. Thousands of people lined up to pay respects. So that was remarkable for me. Another person, kind of in the more, visible world would be like Eric Spofford is a businessman who is a mentor to me. He, was a high school dropout, heroin addict, built a large treatment center business in the Northeast in New Hampshire and in New England, and sold it back in 2021 for 9 figures. So he's somebody who I really admire. Patrick Bet-David is a businessman that I admire. I really identify with people who have overcome adversity and built something. And one of my things that I'm really passionate about is trying to inspire people to do the same. Like, it doesn't matter where you come from or what you've been through. Like, this is America. We have a very unique opportunity here to overcome whatever circumstances we are born into or find ourselves in through hard work and determination and education.
So what is it ultimately every day that gets you out of bed, motivates you, and gets you through your day? What is your ultimate motivator?
I guess you could say I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I lost everything, right? I got kicked out of my own business. There were a lot of people who didn't believe in me, people who didn't think I was going to make it, people who wrote me off. And that, some people might say like, oh, that's kind of a negative motivator. Well, for me, that works. Like, I not only do I have something to prove to all those people, I have something to prove to myself, that the people who thought that about me were wrong, and that, because I have a negative inner voice too. I think a lot of us do. I think probably most people do. But I always have to make sure that negative voice is wrong.
What has been one of the best client responses, best fan letters you've ever gotten from the work you've done in your life?
I've just recently, like since October, gotten active in the social media space and kind of building this personal brand for myself. And, I heard this thing that your mess is your message, and that there are people in the world who are going through what I have been through, and that it would be very helpful for them to hear from me. that hey, it's possible to turn things around. Like you can do this, you can be okay, because people do give up, right? And I don't want people to give up. I want people to feel inspired, to feel like they can do something. So since I started sharing my story publicly, my stories about addiction and recovery and overcoming that, my stories about mental health and the things that I've gone through, the challenges around panic attacks, I've gotten a lot of really nice messages from people on social media, Instagram and LinkedIn, from sharing my stories and people thanking me for my vulnerability, and that they are going through the same thing or have been through the same thing and are ashamed of it and not comfortable talking about it, and hoping that they can get through it and one day do the same thing. And that would be definitely the most touching thing that I've received from people.
So, obviously in life, through all of our successes and adversities, we gain wisdom going through them. And I'm curious, if you were to have a dream tonight and run into your 20-year-old version of yourself, and you could dispense advice based on the wisdom you've gained in your life, what would you tell that younger version of you?
I've actually thought about this a lot, and it's like, do you tell your younger version of yourself to avoid all these pitfalls? I think a lot of the pitfalls that I went through formed who I am today. I think if I had to tell him anything, it would be that, you are a good person. You don't have anything to prove to these people around you. You need to love yourself and stop trying to impress all these people, because you won't even know them in 5 years.
Well said. Yeah, and I think that question can be confusing because it's not so much about reversing anything, because obviously that would create, unintended ripples, but I think it's more of just kind of that wise place that we all get in. It's kind of an old man question. But so of everything that you've gone through and accomplished in your life, what are you the proudest of? What really puts a smile on your face at the proverbial end of the day?
This probably sounds cheesy, but my son is 14 months old, and I, for a long time, wasn't sure that I was going to have kids. I had this, fear of, is addiction genetic? I don't want to go through what I put my parents through, or bring a child into that and have a child of mine go through the same things that I went through. But ultimately, my wife and I decided to go for it. And, man, it's been the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. The look on his face when I walk in at the end of the day is just priceless. And so that is absolutely the thing that I'm most proud of is my son. Man, he's an amazing little guy. I now know what people have been talking about for all these years about not really knowing what true love is until you have a child of your own.
Yeah, it's the truth, the biggest truth. So everyone out there has a perception of you, an idea of who they think you are. We have all these lights and bubbles of people around us, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but ultimately you live your life. You have a perception of yourself. Who do you think you are?
That's a very interesting question. It kind of vacillates from day to day. Some days I feel like I am a very good leader who cares about the people that I work with, creates opportunities for people. I employ a couple hundred people between my businesses. I care about them deeply. I think one of the things that matters to me a lot is having a good culture where people feel like they can be themselves and they have a voice. And then some days I feel like an imposter. Like, why do these people follow me? I have no idea what I'm doing. But I'd say 5 out of 7 days I feel like I'm a good leader, and so I think that's doing okay, right?
Yeah, for sure, man. So, Willie, if anyone out there wants to learn more about you, what you do, anything revolving around your world, where can they go to find out?
On Instagram, I'm Willie Mckenzie Official. That's Willie with an IE. And then on Instagram, I'm Willie Mckenzie. On LinkedIn, Willie Mckenzie CEO.
Right on. Willie, hey, thank you for opening up, man. This has been wonderful to talk with you. Best of luck with everything. It's a great story.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate the chat. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.